The road stretched endlessly, fields of golden corn swaying on either side, the air so still it felt like time itself had slowed. I hadn't meant to drive this far, hadn't planned to let the silence of Pennsylvania's back roads swallow me whole, but something about escaping the noise of my life had pushed me here. Daniel's voice still echoed in my head, short, distracted calls about meetings, deadlines, the usual excuses for why he couldn't come home on time. Each word he'd spoken lately seemed stripped of warmth, and I'd grown used to waiting, used to lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if love could really survive neglect. I told myself this trip was about clarity, about breathing in a life simpler than mine, but deep down I knew I was running from the hollowness Daniel had left me with. The town was quiet, almost eerily so, the streets free of neon signs or loud engines. Horse-drawn buggies moved with deliberate calm, men in straw hats and suspenders working fields with an ease that made me jealous. It felt like I had stepped into another century. I drove until the pavement turned into gravel, until the clouds above split open and the sky darkened with the weight of summer rain. When the downpour came, it was merciless, soaking the earth, drumming on the hood of my car. I pulled over beside a large wooden barn, its dark with glistening in the storm, and sprinted inside, desperate for shelter. The smell of hay and animals hit me first, raw, earthy, grounding. Dust floated in the air, caught in streaks of dim light, seeping through cracks in the walls. I shook out my jacket, brushing off droplets, before I heard the sound of boots against the wood. Turning, I froze. He stood a few feet away, holding a pitchfork, his sleeves rolled high on his forearms, his shirt clinging faintly to a body shaped by work rather than vanity. Is that shadowed part of his face, but his eyes caught me, pale, piercing, watchful, like they were studying me as much as they were guarding something inside him. "You lost?" he asked softly, his voice carrying a timbre both cautious and kind. "Just waiting out the rain," I replied, my breath unsteady for reasons I didn't fully admit to myself. He nodded, leaning the pitchfork against the beam, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "You can stay until it passes." His name came after a pause, Josiah. The way he said it was almost reluctant, like offering too much to a stranger could be dangerous. He asked mine, and when I answered, his mouth tugged into the faintest smile. He had no idea that the sound of it would stay with me long after. We spoke little at first. He worked quietly, moving hay, checking on a horse in the stall, and I lingered, pretending to watch the storm but stealing glances at him whenever I thought he wouldn't notice. His movements were fluid, unhurried, the kind of physical grace born from routine. There was nothing performative about him, no city boy pretense. Just a young man at ease in his world. And yet, I caught moments, brief flickers, when his gaze lingered on me, too. Every second stretched. The thunder outside cracked, rattling the wood, and the barn seemed to hold its breath with us. I told myself to think of Daniel, to remember why I was here in the first place. But Daniel's image felt distant, blurred, while Josiah was flesh and bone in front of me, close enough for me to see the veins in his hands, the faint dampness at his collar, the tension in his jaw. "You're not from here," he said finally, like it was more observation than question. "No," I admitted, just needed some space, needed quiet. He looked at me, really looked, as if he understood more than I'd said. "You found the right place." For a moment, silence wrapped around us again. The rain hammered harder, and I realized how close we were standing. Neither of us moved away. My pulse raced, though nothing had happened. It was a possibility, the unspoken current running between us. That tied me there. The storm showed no sign of letting up, and neither did my thoughts. I should have walked back to the car, should have reminded myself that someone was waiting for me miles away. Instead, I stayed rooted to the barn floor, caught in the quiet gravity of Josiah's presence. His breath, his stillness, the way his eyes linger a fraction too long, it all pressed against the edges of restraint. I didn't know then what line I might cross, or how one night in a barn could unravel the loyalty I'd promised. All I knew was that the rain outside had trapped me, but it wasn't the storm that kept me from leaving. It was him. The storm had passed, but I found myself back at the barn the next afternoon, long after the sky had cleared. I told myself I was curious about farm life, about the quiet discipline of it, but I knew the truth. Josiah had lingered in my mind like the aftertaste of something forbidden yet intoxicating. The way his eyes had held me, steady and searching, had carved a space in me that Daniel hadn't filled in months. When I stepped inside, the barn smelled of fresh hay and wood, warmed by the afternoon sun. Josiah was there again, brushing down a horse with slow, deliberate strokes. He didn't seem surprised to see me, though his brow lifted slightly, like he'd been expecting me and hadn't decided yet if that was a good thing. "You came back," he said, his voice even but tinged with something I couldn't name. "Guess I was curious," I replied, forcing a casual shrug. "I've never seen this kind of life up close." He studied me for a beat, then nodded, motioning toward a bale of hay. "You can watch if you'd like. Just stay out of the way." So I did, but my watching had little to do with the horse. My eyes betrayed me, tracing the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt, the way his forearms flexed with each motion, the faint sheen of sweat on his temple. He was beautiful in a way that wasn't polished or intentional, and it drew me in even deeper. At one point, he handed me a brush. Our fingers touched, brief, accidental, but the jolt that passed between us was unmistakable. He froze, his eyes flicking to mine, and for a moment the world around us fell away. Neither of us pulled back quickly. Instead, I felt the air thicken, the silence between us louder than any sound. "You're different," Josiah said at last, his words low. I swallowed hard. "Different how?" He looked away, brushing at the hay scattered near his boots. "Most people don't look at me the way you do." Heat climbed my chest, shame mixing with desire. I thought of Daniel, of his distracted texts, the way he kissed me out of habit instead of hunger. I should have stopped then, should have walked out of that barn and driven away. But instead, the truth spilled out of me like water breaking free. "I have someone," I admitted, my voice unsteady, "back home. But he doesn't see me anymore. Not the way I need." Josiah's eyes lifted, and for the first time, I saw his own confession mirrored in them. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint salt of sweat, the hay dust clinging to his shirt. "I've never been with anyone," he whispered, "but sometimes I think about it. More than I should. I don't know why I'm telling you this." I exhaled, my chest tight, maybe because I needed to hear it. The space between us dissolved. His hand brushed against mine again, and this time neither of us pulled away. The barn seemed to hold us, the thick wooden beams standing like silent witnesses. My heart pounded so loudly I thought he might hear it. When his lips finally met mine, it wasn't rushed or clumsy. It was hesitant, searching, like he was stepping across a threshold he'd feared all his life. I kissed him back, every ounce of restraint melting. His hand came to my jaw, rough from work but trembling with inexperience, and I leaned into it, letting the weight of months of loneliness pour out of me. The hay was soft beneath us as we stumbled down together, his body pressed against mine, the scent of earth and sweat and rain lingering around us. Every touch was discovery, every gasp a secret we were breaking open. I thought of Daniel once. Just once, a flash of guilt sharp enough to sting. But then Josiah's breath was on my neck, his hands gripping me with a hunger that had nothing to do with sin and everything to do with being alive. And the guilt was drowned out by need. We didn't speak much. Words would have shattered the fragile magic that wrapped us. Instead, there were whispers, small sounds, the creak of wood above us, the rustle of hay as we gave into what neither of us had dared before. It was reckless, it was dangerous, and yet it was the most human I had felt in a long time. When it was over, I lay there with him, the barn fading into a blur around us. My chest heaved, my mind a storm of guilt and exhilaration. I had crossed the line, I swore I wouldn't, and yet, staring up at the beams above, feeling Josiah's breath warm on my shoulder, I knew I couldn't bring myself to regret it. The sun dipped lower, painting the barn in golden light, and I realized that nothing would ever be the same after this. I had let desire take the reins, and though the moment had passed, the weight of it would follow me long after I left this place. The next morning, the barn felt different. Sunlight streamed into cracks in the wood, spilling across the hay in thin golden stripes. The storm had passed, leaving the air sharp and clean, but I carried a heaviness that no clear sky could sweep away. I stirred awake to the sound of rustling, the quiet shuffle of boots on the wooden floor. Josiah was already up, pulling his suspenders over his shoulders, his movements stiff, deliberate. For a moment, I thought about reaching for him, pulling him back down beside me, but something in his posture warned me not to. He kept his eyes on the ground, avoiding me as though looking at me might undo the fragile thread of silence that was holding him together. "You should probably get going soon," he said quietly, almost apologetically. The words cut deeper than I expected. I nodded, brushing hay from my clothes, trying to hide the ache that spread through me. "Yeah," I said, "you're probably right." We didn't speak much as he finished his chores, and I sat there, pretending to watch but really memorizing the curve of his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched when he thought too hard. It was absurd how quickly he had carved a space inside me. Last night had been more than just a reckless act. It had been connection, raw and undeniable. And yet, in the morning light, it felt fragile, fleeting, like something neither of us was allowed to keep. When he finally did look at me, his eyes were softer than his words. "What happened here? It can't go beyond this." I swallowed hard, guilt rising like bile in my throat. "I know," I whispered, but the truth was heavier. I thought of Daniel waiting, or not waiting, back home. I thought of the way I had once clung to the hope that he would look at me again the way Josiah had last night, with hunger, with need. And I knew then that no matter how much I told myself I loved him, something had broken between us long before this barn. Josiah hadn't caused a fracture. He had only revealed it. Still, shame pressed down on me as I followed Josiah outside. The field stretched endlessly under the morning sun, dew glittering on the tall grass, birds calling out in the distance. It should have been peaceful, but my chest was tight. At the edge of the gravel path, I paused, unsure of how to say goodbye. Josiah stood with his hands shoved into his pockets, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," I said finally, the words weak, insufficient. He gave a small nod. "Take care of yourself." There was no kiss, no lingering touch, just a silence that seemed to hold all the things we couldn't say. I turned, walked back to my car, and didn't look back until I was already behind the wheel. When I did, he was still there, a lone figure framed against the vast openness of his world. The drive back was a blur of highways and thoughts I couldn't untangle. My phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Hope the trip's going well. Miss you." I stared at it for a long time, my throat tightening. Did he really miss me, or was it just something he thought he should say? Did I miss him, or did I only miss the way we used to be? I didn't respond right away. My fingers hovered over the screen, but every word felt like a lie. All I could think about was the barn, the smell of hay, the heat of Josiah's skin, the way he had kissed me like it was his first and last chance. And buried beneath the guilt was a quiet truth. I had loved it, not just the act, but the way it made me feel seen again, wanted again, alive. By the time I reached the city, the noise of traffic and neon lights swallowed the quiet simplicity I'd left behind. I parked in front of my apartment building and sat there, staring at the familiar door that led back to Daniel, to the life I was supposed to want. My heart was torn between two worlds, the comfort of loyalty and the fire of something forbidden. I knew I would walk inside. I knew I would smile and pretend nothing had changed. But I also knew that deep down, I had crossed into a place from which there was no return. Josiah would fade into memory, perhaps, but the way he made me feel would not. And so, even as I turned off the engine and gathered my things, one thought echoed louder than the rest, a truth I couldn't silence. In that Amish barn, with Josiah, I had found what I'd been searching for. It wasn't just desire. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a reminder that I was still capable of being consumed, of being wanted, of being loved. And though I carried guilt like a shadow, I couldn't deny that a part of me longed to feel it again.